Welcome to this special edition of Living in Monrovia. I'm Stephanie Meyer,
I'm Karen Meyer.
and we're really happy you could join us today. Today we're going to be talking about a very important issue which you actually know a lot about.
Well, we'll be talking about the proposed hillside development and the upcoming election, measures A and B, which will kind of decide the fate, how this hillside development is going to go.
Yeah, now some people have been really involved with this hillside development, have been attending a lot of meetings, but for those of you who maybe want a little bit more information, we've put together this video. So we hope it clarifies some issues, and we'll see you afterwards and tell you a little bit more. Los Angeles, California is famous for its glamour and glitz, as well as its congestion and sprawl. But on the outskirts of this metropolis, there's a unique place called Monrovia. Here, reminders of the past are lovingly preserved and embraced. Residents are proud of where they live and enjoy celebrating local traditions honoring the founding of their town. Many believe that this strong sense of community sets Monrovia apart from other suburbs of Los Angeles. City officials have worked hard to redevelop the economic infrastructure of Monrovia. Small businesses have sprouted up all over and are thriving. Major corporations have found a strong consumer base as well. Monrovia has been distinguished as an all-America city and has attracted many a curious visitor. Residents appreciate the progress their town has made, but many feel the hills of untouched land are Monrovia's greatest asset. The freshwater streams up here contribute to the drinking water for the community and the San Gabriel Valley. Wildlife abounds. Coyotes, foxes, bobcats, deer, hawks, eagles, raccoons, and even black bears. Residents never quite know who might be stopping by for an afternoon snack or an evening dip in the pool. In Monrovia, appreciation for nature has always gone hand in hand with a practical need for economic growth. But recently, this delicate balance was put in jeopardy. Residents learned that as many as 128 homes, possibly in a gated community, were proposed for the Madison and Cloverleaf Canyon sections of the open foothills. Monrovians took it upon themselves to find out more about this proposed housing development and how it would impact their environment. They discovered that traffic would increase by 300% on some of the access roads leading to and from the new homes. Many wondered how their neighborhood would handle such congestion. Residents also accepted the offer by city staff to tour the proposed development site. As they hiked through these beautiful mountains, Monrovians were overwhelmed. They resolved to do everything in their power to save this open space.
This is one of the last undisturbed foothill areas in the San Gabriel Valley, in fact in the entire Los Angeles basin, and that these lower elevation areas are actually much more important to save because they are where people want to live, of course, because they're flat, so it makes them desirable. But it also makes it more desirable to animals, to plants and to animals. And this is actually where the plants and the animals live. And if we build here, then there's no place for them to go. That's it.
This land is indeed very uncommon, even rare, in particular in Southern California. It's not an isolated pocket of land. It is connected to the Angeles Forest and it's connected to foothills. Most cities have already lost their foothills. Monrovia, fortunately, has not. But truly, there are numerous benefits to those foothills, the natural resources being preserved in their natural state.
We have 3 streams that are freshwater sources. One's year-round, 2 is seasonal. Not only are they good breeding grounds and sustain wildlife, it's very clear that because we have aquifers in the basin here, that fresh water supplies a large percentage of our drinking water. And when you go into development in a wilderness area, you're going to have rodent abatement, which is pesticides. You're going to have weed abatement, pesticides, and we have decaying granite underneath, and nobody can tell me there isn't gonna be some seepage into our wells. You know, not only in getting ready for development, but, just the landscaping that's gonna go on and the things that people use on their lawns and their.
Before land is developed, its terrain and wildlife habitat are scientifically documented in an assessment. Based on this data, an Environmental Impact Report, or EIR, is drafted. According to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the California Department of Fish and Game, the proper protocol was not followed when Monrovia's foothills were surveyed. Hence, the EIRs used to determine if or how much land could be developed were incomplete. Over a period of 18 months, the Monrovia Planning Commission and the Monrovia City Council held public hearings regarding the hillside development issue. Residents publicized these meetings in their neighborhood. A grassroots movement took shape and encouraged many to become involved and speak their mind. Large venues were used for the public hearings to accommodate huge turnouts, often more than 200 people. This is what some of the property owners and representatives of the undeveloped land had to say.
My family has owned and paid property taxes on our 40-acre parcel since the early 1900s. I became a member of the Hillside Advisory Committee in 1991. I had no idea what a painful and expensive process it would be to determine the development potential of our property.
We live in a system where property can't be simply taken without any compensation. And I think that we are, or the city, is dangerously close to a regulatory taking that will embed them into a position that will have no out other than litigation.
I hope that we can come up with a conservancy plan. We'd be very happy to sell the property at a reasonable price to the city. I mean, it would eliminate a lot of headaches as far as we are concerned. After these 10 or so many years that we've been involved in the process, we'd like to get out of it and get on with a little more pleasant activities in our life.
I bought the property with the intent of building my own home there, along with other homes for my family and for friends that may wish to join me on the hill. I feel that I've been badly treated. It's time to get on with the process. Thank you.
I'm not going to walk away from this room tonight perceived as a bad guy. I have done what you asked, and I have paid for it. Why don't you buy my property? And I've given you enough options tonight that surely you can afford one of them. And if these people really want to be motivated towards acquiring funds from conservancies and such, this gives you the ability to go do that.
We would be very willing participants in a program that would work out a very reasonable purchase program, give you plenty of time, be very reasonable with all different kinds of incentives. We also would still consider under that basis donating a portion of our property because unlike Mr. Miller, we would benefit a little bit from some tax advantages. So we would consider an alternative like that if the city is available, if the funds are available from the city.
This is just a sampling of what some of the residents and the representatives had to say.
People my age, like Monrovia High School students, enjoy the parks, the horseback riding that goes on, and the trails to walk on up in the hills. Let's not have a rush to judgment. Thanks.
I beg you to consider the wishes of those of us who aren't in this for money at all. We're in it for the quality of our life, and we'd like it to be preserved.
Please consider a financial solution to meet both citizen and landowner rights. Draw on conservancies and other measures. Why does the answer have to include development?
I am with the number of people who do not want to see this development move forward. I think it's ill-considered. I think it's self-defeating. I think it's destructive to all the wonderful things we have done and built into our community.
There's a particular concern that I have with the lack of information or facts as it comes from the EIR. And an example might best be made by using one of the federally endangered species and state endangered, which is the California gnatcatcher. I brought a t-shirt with it emblazoned on that where everybody can see the actual size. This bird, plus others such as the Kino checker spot butterfly, Least Bell's vireo, what we know about the Brompton's milk vetch and others, seem to have not been adequately surveyed in our EIR.
The undersigned members, including the ones behind me, are of the Monrovia High School Student Council, and we, meaning every single member in the council, strongly object to any further bulldozing of Monrovia's beautiful natural resources in our foothills.
I'm currently a career firefighter with 31 years experience in a nearby city with 20 years experience as a fire captain, suppression engine company. I'm on record from January 17th of last year with the Planning Commission stating my concerns about life safety and property protection in this, if the city chooses to develop further into the foothills. My concern is with the lack of adequate access to emergency apparatus on the west side of Monrovia, where the majority of apparatus will be responding from with proposed plans A, B, C, etc.
Good evening. My name is Jan Chatton-Brown. I'm an attorney specializing in environmental and land use law. And Nancy Zach and a number of other Monrovia residents asked me to weigh in on this issue. It is not appropriate for you to certify the environmental impact report tonight. I understand the desire to reduce the density in the area with the existing plan, but there are some real dangers for the residents should you certify an EIR.
This is a letter from Samuel Dunlop, who's a tribal spokesman for the Gabrielino Tongva Tribal Council. And this is a letter to Robert Kastenbaum in regard to the revised draft EIR on the Madison specific plan and Cloverleaf Canyon specific plan amendment. It says, "Dear Mr. Kastenbaum, the Gabrielino Tongva Tribal Council of San Gabriel would like to take this opportunity to respond to the revised draft EIR of the above named project that the City of Monrovia is currently circulating for comment. As the proposed project falls within the cultural boundaries and sphere of influence of the Gabrielino Tongva Tribal Council of San Gabriel, we feel it is our responsibility to express our concerns in matters that may directly impact the cultural resources of this tribe. Our focus of concern is on the archaeological element of the revised draft EIR and its subsequent mitigation measures. Since subsurface construction and grading activities have the potential for uncovering and exposing previously unknown sensitive cultural deposits and/or human remains, it would be our recommendation that qualified Native American monitors be present to observe these construction activities and to notify and address a discovery as required by law."
I remember reading, and I can't quote what month or whatever there was in the LA Times magazine, there was a biologist who was talking about the wildlife corridors and what happens with all the development. He was talking specifically about the Pointe Hills, but up here I've heard about the biodiversity we have up there. And as you develop that, you're cutting off wildlife corridors, the genetic pool, you're affecting the animals. And he says if we keep doing this and we don't stop, we're going to end up having populations of wildlife, of rats, possums, pigeons, and cockroaches, because that's all that's going to be left and sustain it. And I would hope, we wouldn't leave a legacy like that for our children and grandchildren down the road.
I would also like to say that in a survey that I conducted last year, 73% of those that answered indicated that they would prefer the hillside to be left in its present state. I'm definitely not saying that we should take the land from the landowners, but landowners have expressed that they would be willing to sell at a fair market value, and I hope that we will explore that option, finding out what the fair market value is and how to raise the money. Maybe this is our solution.
I'm sure you're all aware that there's something called zoning by initiative. All of the residents of this community could have the right to vote on the zoning and vote a zoning plan that would more suit the residents of this community. Please consider putting this to a general vote. Let us residents choose what we want done with this very special and unique environment. Thank you.
I represent the Foothills Wildlife Conservancy. I am a lawyer. I'm going to try to do this in 5 minutes or less. My concern really is what I'd like to refer to as a level playing field. I've watched some of the tapes. I've heard some of the developers come up and threaten you and the staff with lawsuits. Unfortunately, I've heard some of my colleagues come up and threaten you with lawsuits, lots of damages. And, you know, when a lawyer keeps threatening a layman, it sort of tilts the field. What I want to point out to you is that these threats are without justification.
I'm concerned also because of the geological area that we're talking about in the hills. This is a liquefaction area and it is landslide prone. What kind of guarantee does the city have that there will not be fiduciary responsibility on our part as a city if we allow property development in that kind of area?
We're taking a lot of pride in our community about the process that we've been through, and I think we need to finish it up right, and I don't know why we're rushing so much here at the end. I'd really like to strongly suggest that this go back to the Planning Commission, get a little fresher look at it.
Will future generations look back and celebrate the visionary actions we take today to ensure the quality of life and to protect our remaining natural heritage? Or instead, will they look back with shame at our continuing short-sighted destruction of our way of life and the world around us? It's up to you to decide.
Every time I drive on Greystone from Canyon, I still remember the smell of orange blossoms. It has been gradually less and less orange trees. It seems too bad that orange trees weren't protected in the same way oak trees are. These things happen, and we don't miss them until they're gone.
The city staff made the following recommendations to the Monrovia City Council.
At stake here this evening is, as the mayor described it, nearly 1,000 acres of property that is in our hillside areas that needs to be planned for our future generations. Again, much easier said than done. The property owners who own the large portion of that property, and it is privately owned, have an expectation and a right under state law to expect to use that property in a reasonable fashion. The property owners nearby, the residents who have already chosen to live in any particular neighborhood that abuts our residential neighborhood, also have a stake in this, because whatever happens in our foothills in the future, they are certainly going to feel the effects of that.
The city has chosen not to do site-specific biological surveys at this time. We have not gone out and looked for environmentally protected plants and animals. We've not gone out and looked for the habitat environmentally protected animals in a thoroughgoing way. We have made a strategic choice to defer that biological review until such time as we have an application for development. We have done that because the resource agencies have also told us that a biological survey that's more than a year old is not reliable, because as we all know, when we pull dandelions out of our front yard, you wait a year, there's a few more dandelions, and some of these plants move around just as freely. So the city has made a considered judgment that a portion of the environmental review is more appropriately done only immediately attendant to development. I'll also point out to the taxpayers in the room that when you do that, the developer pays for that biological survey. If you do it in the current situation, developers are paying for it only in that voluntary contribution way. So the city is making a judgment to do a portion of the environmental review later. The resource agencies are telling us to do it now. We understand why they're telling us to do it now, but we've made a considered judgment to do it later.
Members of the Monrovia City Council also expressed their opinions about the foothills and development.
I've said since my early days on the City Council that our foothills are our last frontier. They must be preserved and treated accordingly.
It's not about reducing the traffic, it's about maybe getting to know traffic, and the only way to do that is to get out and open up a lot of wallets and get a lot of money to do that, and I'm very hopeful we can do that.
I would have to say that in my tenure of the City Council, this is probably the hardest decision that I'll have to make up to date, and I want all of you to know that I don't believe that any of us will take making this decision lightly.
I would very much like to thank the people who have taken so much time to come out and give us their thoughts. It's good to know and it helps us so that we're able to make a decision that's better.
We have all been united in believing that if there's a willing seller and a willing buyer, we can truly make something happen, and all the other issues are moot points.
When it came time for the council members to make a final decision on development, they placed their votes.
Mayor Pro Tem Adams.
Yes.
Councilmember Garcia.
Yes.
Councilmember Blakely.
Aye.
Councilmember Hammond.
Aye.
And Mayor Burke.
Aye.
The plans for development were approved. In this battle between David and Goliath, had Goliath won? Not quite yet. The residents of Monrovia did make a difference. In the final development plan approved by the City Council, the number of proposed homes had been cut in half, and the concept of a gated community had been scrapped. Over a period of 18 months, Monrovians testified how important saving the foothills was to them. The City Council and staff did listen. In response, a special election has been set for July 11th, 2000. On the ballot will be Measures A and B. Measure A would cap development at 75 homes in the contested hills of Monrovia. Measure A would also protect open space in this area and designate it as Hillside Wilderness Preserve and Hillside Recreation. Measure B would pay for the purchase and preservation of the open space mentioned in Measure A. This would come to a tax of about $44 a year, paid out over 30 years for the average Monrovia homeowner. If Monrovians were to vote yes on both these measures, City Council and staff maintain it would be possible to achieve zero density or no development in the foothills. Many residents support a yes vote on Measures A and B and have begun campaigning for the upcoming election. The ballot measures have attracted the attention of international organizations which have succeeded in preserving open space in other parts of the San Gabriel Valley, such as Puente Hills.
It's just a landmark decision on the part of the city to actually recognize the value that open space brings to the community and say this is something our residents need, this is something worth having, and actually stepping up to the plate and saying we are willing to spend the money to buy the development rights to these properties and preserve them in perpetuity so our residents can have them.
There are several issues which Monrovians are considering in regards to Measures A and B. An appraisal of the foothill lands in question has not yet been completed, but the property is estimated to be worth around $20 million. The tax proposed in Measure B would raise about half that amount.
The bond measure by no means is going to cover 100% of the monies needed to purchase the land, or a combination purchase and donation by the property owners. But it'll just be part of the pie. City of Monrovia is also looking at federal grants that could be available, or in future appropriation bills before Congress to have money inserted for it.
So clearly a yes vote, there will be monies available, and hopefully through citizen participation in our local democracy, we can help ensure that the monies that are raised, if we get a yes vote, are spent wisely and preserve as much as possible. And that money, with raising $10 million, that's enough to get matching funds from numerous other sources. The entire foothill area can be preserved. I mean, it's definitely doable if it's done right.
Some say that Measures A and B are only important to people whose property is close to the foothills.
I was in one of the hearings when a statement was made that the concerns were largely isolated to the hillside residents, the In My Backyard group. And I decided to go out and check the waters on that. And so I put together a petition that went over the issues that we had raised as foothill representatives. And it went out, it was really a fascinating petition. It took very little effort, very quickly done, and we picked up 420 signatures, almost doing nothing. And the important point was that people came up and wanted to sign, and those signatures represented every sector of Monrovia, all the way down to the unincorporated areas, who I believe the city had assumed did not care what happens to the foothills because they were at some distance. They were just as concerned about preserving the natural state of our community. And another interesting point was unsolicited, people that did business in Monrovia signed, and it represented 13 other communities in the valley. So that told me that this is not only a hillside issue, but a community issue. It's also a regional concern.
Well, I think it's important for a lot of the residents, for the city of Monrovia. For 22 years, I lived on Anita Street, and I always looked at the mountains. It helped make me have to do the dishes a little bit less painful to do, being able to look outside and see the mountains of Monrovia, regardless from where I was. That view was important to me. And I think a lot of our residents feel that way. If you look at our zoning laws, we have things regarding line of sight, because folks want to see the mountains of Monrovia, and they're very pretty.
You get a lot of very positive feedback from the citizens of Monrovia, which is just wonderful. People care about this. This is something that they're passionate about, and this is great, from all walks of life and from everywhere in Monrovia.
Citizens voting to tax themselves sounds like a novel idea, but whether the foothills are preserved as open space or turned into a housing development, Monrovians will end up footing the bill. According to studies conducted by the Trust for Public Land, new housing tracts place an additional strain on a city's infrastructure. Yet, this expense is not completely covered by the property taxes generated from the new residents. In the end, Monrovians must ask themselves if they want their tax dollars to subsidize this or this. If Measures A and B were to pass, there has been some question as to how the newly acquired open space would be used.
The land that is at the greatest, the foothills land that's at the greatest risk right now of development that we're trying to preserve is all through this area. And we'd like to preserve everything. We'd like to be able to assist in the preservation of everything across Monrovia's foothills. But this is the Madison specific plan area, and this is the Cloverleaf specific plan area. Our goal is to raise funds to acquire the land, to hold it in this public benefit corporation and public trust, to hold it in perpetuity in its natural state.
As far as recreation, we believe that there are some areas up here that have existing trails and that would be used for people to hike and very passive, eco-friendly recreation. We are not interested in building any structures or developing new trails or in, I think that the Monrovia Mountains Conservancy believes that any type of recreation that does occur should be done in a way that's courteous to the neighbors. I think that that's number one, and that does not negatively impact the land any more than it already has been. But we believe that access to the community is very important, especially if you purchase these properties with taxpayer dollars. And this is just such a beautiful, beautiful place that if we can get a few people interested and just have limited hiking, that would be a very positive thing for the entire community.
The Sierra Club strongly believes in saving not only open space that is really pristine and out in the wilderness, but having open space available to residents. There are a lot of people in the LA area who can't get to the big national parks, can't get to Montana or to Wyoming to see the park. So saving open space within the urban fabric is very important to allow city kids to have another frame of reference beyond the city. And I think what Monrovia is doing for its residents in attempting to set this land aside is a very positive move, and one that I think a lot of other cities are going to be looking at very closely if it's successful. So I certainly commend the city of Monrovia, the city council, and the residents of Monrovia for hopefully voting measures A and B up and going ahead and setting aside this land, not only for the residents, but for all of us who can use the land.
The intent of Measures A and B is to achieve zero density in the foothills. However, there are still those who maintain that some of the land is ripe for development.
There's been a lot of talk about these so-called disturbed properties in the lower elevations. And, oh, well, maybe the disturbed properties, they could be developed. But actually, you get a higher biodiversity in the lower elevations than in the higher elevations. So this is an excellent opportunity for a restoration project. This is a coastal sage scrub area, which is a prime habitat for several endangered species. And this is an excellent opportunity to try and restore a coastal sage scrub habitat, which is starting to be done out in the Benally area, but they're the first, and we can certainly leverage off of what they've learned. It would be, I think, a terrific project for the community to restore this area up here.
Some Monrovians wonder why they should approve any possible development, since the environmental impact reports did not properly document many endangered species and plant life in the open foothills.
There have not been thorough environmental impact reports. So as far as what's really up there, the studies haven't been done, so we don't know. And that's one of the things we were pushing for before the city certified the environmental impact reports, and it hasn't been done, but the city of Monrovia has assured the citizens that thorough and comprehensive environmental impact reports will be done before tract map submittal.
One might assume that the residents who spoke out against development are a small but vocal minority. This is not true. They are part of a growing movement across the country to preserve open space. According to the Land Trust Alliance, 88% of voters nationwide agreed that, quote, "We must act now or we will lose many special places, and if we wait, what is destroyed or lost cannot be replaced," end quote. Election results in America reflect this concern. In 1999, measures like A and B proposed in Monrovia won 90% voter approval across the country. According to the Trust for Public Land, which provides funding for open space, many economic benefits flow from land conservation. It makes a town more attractive and reduces the cost of providing infrastructure to new homes. Real estate values also go up in smart communities that have low density. This environment attracts more companies seeking quality of life for their employees. In Southern California, much land has already been lost to urban sprawl. Open space is a rare commodity. To preserve it, activists must educate others of this land's existence.
A lot of people look at Southern California, people who seem to have a bias toward pristine coastlines and redwood trees and things like that, and think that there isn't very much in Southern California. We've talked to U.S. senators, Congress people about the wildlife corridor here, and they kind of say, well, why are you bothering? And then we start showing them pictures of what's really here. And you have to realize that Southern California, because of the diversity of habitats and the diversity of terrains, the fact that it goes from ocean sea level up to almost over 11,000 feet, is one of the most diverse ecosystems on the face of the earth. But also, because of that and because of development, it's a hotbed for extinctions. So we really feel that it's extremely important to save these places and preserve what we have here and what we can enjoy. It's a very unique set of ecosystems that we have here, and many people don't even realize it because a lot of the land is in private development. I think setting it aside in public ownership and making it available and making educational opportunities available so people understand the importance of what we're seeing up here is, I can't stress enough, it's extremely important to all of the residents of the city.
In order to preserve Monrovia's foothills, several local conservancies have organized to raise awareness and access funds to purchase open space.
Instead of just ranting and raving against the development and not coming up with a solution, we felt that it would be best to bring a solution which would make everybody happy, a win-win situation. And the idea of conservancy came up, of possibly purchasing the land or asking the owners to donate it, to provide a tax incentive for the owners, and then putting it into conservancy so that it would be saved forever, for perpetuity is what they call it. And so then, of course, we've jumped in and gotten heavily involved since then because we do think that it is the best solution. It's a win-win situation for everyone.
There are no environmental police. It's up to volunteer organizations like the Foothills Wildlife Conservancy and individual volunteers to stand up and say, no, enough is enough. We don't want to lose this. This is a precious natural resource we want to preserve. And that's what we need to do in the San Gabriel Valley. I mean, this is a local issue of saving Monrovia's foothills, but again, over the past couple of years and interacting with other environmental organizations, it's become very apparent there is a broader need, and it's really going to take people standing up and saying, we want to make a difference. The whole point of the community awareness is really geared towards how can you make a difference in the end, raising funds, acquiring the land in its natural state, preserving it in its natural state, maintaining it, good stewardship on a long-term basis. That's really what Foothills Wildlife Conservancy is about.
The California State Senate Rules Committee has appointed Laura Blakely, Monrovia City Council member, as a co-chair for the San Gabriel Lower Los Angeles Rivers and Mountains Conservancy. This conservancy will receive funding from Propositions 12 and 13, which recently passed in California.
City of Monrovia played an important role in the creation of that conservancy. Personally, I went to Sacramento many times providing testimony, speaking to members of the different legislative committees to support the legislation. City of Monrovia, the staff, tremendously helpful in helping me with the information to give, and to photographs and to samples. So we were very important. We knew that this conservancy would be very helpful to us, not just with trying to acquire open space, but also the way that the money pot is written. It could make it so that Canyon Park programs could also access some of the funds for programs, not necessarily for land acquisition. So it holds a lot of great promise for the San Gabriel Valley and for our area. And yes, I definitely want to get money for our residents and for our city.
All too often, the struggle to conserve open space plays out like a modern-day tragedy. The tools of man turn this into this, and finally this. But the story in Monrovia is still an open-ended one. If residents vote yes on measures A and B, they could potentially halt development in the Madison-Pacific and Cloverleaf Canyon areas. With $10 million raised from taxes, the City Council and staff believe they can find matching funds through state and federal grants to purchase the foothills in question. Residents and local conservancies need to remain a part of this process and will continue their own efforts to raise monies. Most of the property owners have expressed a willingness to sell their land for preservation. If all parties work together, scenery like this will not become a faded memory. Well, we hoped you enjoyed that video and that it maybe clarifies some issues about the hillside development in measures A and B. We wish we could have shown more of the people who spoke out at these meetings, but there were just so many who spoke so eloquently. So just know that that was just a sampling of everyone who showed up. Now, you were very involved with this whole movement. What got you involved?
Well, when I first found out about it, I was concerned about the immediate neighborhood, traffic issues and so forth. But then I realized that this is actually bigger than just this neighborhood. And also I realized that so many people did not know about it. And I thought that this was really important, that, you know, we try to inform as many people as possible so they could study the issues and see for themselves how they felt about it.
Mm-hmm. And are you against development?
I'm not against development per se, but this is such an environmentally sensitive area, the hills above Monrovia, that I think we have to be very, very careful before we do anything, you know, to change them. So I think it would be best to leave them the way they are, and that's why this upcoming election, where we have a chance to vote to raise the funds to purchase the land, that is such a good solution, because that way we'll have control and we'll be able to just keep the foothills the way they are.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems like most people want it that way, and I guess you were saying before that sample ballots have been sent out, so if you're going to be out of town, make sure you get your absentee ballot for the election for July 11th.
Yes, you have to apply. The application for the absentee ballot has to be received by City Hall on July 3rd, I think. It has to be, yeah, July 3rd.
Oh, okay.
So make sure that you get your application there, and then make sure you get it in before the election.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us for this special edition of Living in Monrovia, and we hope to see you again soon.
Yes.